Hello dear students of class 10th, welcome to history class. I hope all of you are fit and healthy. Students, in this video I shall be continuing with the second chapter from your history book, that is Nationalism in India. Students, in the last video I explained you about the participation by tribal community. How did the tribals participate in the movement and why did they participate? I told you that they were restricted, they were not allowed to move into the forest freely. So, that is why they were very angry, and because of that, because forest is like their mother, they are born in the forest and they want to die in that forest itself, and because the Britishers had imposed several laws in entering the forest, so they were very angry, so they participated in the movement for Swaraj. Alright, so I hope the notion of participation of tribals in the movement is clear to everybody. Now students, we will be moving to the next community, that is Swaraj for plantation workers. That means, why did the plantation workers participate in this movement? What was their notion? I told you that there were several groups of people who participated, and the notion for participation of different groups were different from one another. Okay? So, we will see that why the plantation workers they joined this movement for Swaraj. So, students, if I talk about the plantation workers, especially in Assam, you know, for them freedom meant the right to move freely in and out of the confined space in which they were enclosed. So, they were actually restricted, there were so many barriers for them, they were not allowed to move freely from that confined space. For example, if some workers are working in a plantation field, let us suppose coffee or tea, alright. So, they were not allowed to move from that place, not allowed to move from that field. There were restrictions of movement. So, they were very unhappy, and also you know what, there was no link of them with their own village. That means the link from cut this line. And also students, it also meant retaining a link with the village from which they had come. Suppose their village was 100 kilometers away. So, they were not allowed to go to their village frequently. There were several barriers, there were several restrictions, they were only allowed to move in that enclosed space. Why this was so? So that if they will be in that area, in that farm, then they will work continuously, and if they will work continuously, let us suppose it is tea garden, then they will pluck more tea saplings, and if they will pluck more tea saplings, then what will happen? Those tea saplings or those plantations that would be transported, that will be exported to European countries, and from there they can get profit. Who can get profit? The Britishers. So, that is why they were restricted. Since their movement was restricted, they participated in this movement. So, basically for them Swaraj means what? Cut this line. So, for them Swaraj meant what? That means so that they could move freely in the space and they could also go to their village. Alright. Now, students, let me tell you one more thing, that as I told you that they were not allowed to go to their home place. They were restricted. Why they were restricted? Because of one law. There was one law that was imposed on them, and because of that law they were restricted. And you know students, the name of the act according to which they were restricted was Inland Immigration Act of 1859. According to this act, they were not allowed to leave the gardens without permission, and let me also tell you that very rarely they were given permissions to move out. So, because of this they joined the movement. Alright. Now, let me tell you that how did the plantation workers support again I am saying. Now students, let me tell you that how the plantation workers, how did they support the non-cooperation movement, that means what they did in support of non-cooperation movement. So let me tell you that thousands of workers, they left the plantations and they headed home. They told that okay, now we are not going to be your slave, now we are not going to stay in this enclosed space, we need to move out from this place and we are going to our destination, that is our home. So thousands of workers, they did this, and you know, they also believed that Gandhi Raj was coming, so they will be given land in their own home village. This they also thought, and you know, because of this, they several workers, they headed home, but let me tell you that they never reached their destination. That is, destination means their home village. Why they never reached? Because when they moved out from that enclosed area, they were involved in several other activities, for example, several strikes, rallies, marches, satyagrahas. So that means they were involved in some or the other kind of activity once they got free from the plantation land. So this way, these plantation workers, they supported non-cooperation movement. All right. Now students, I have explained you regarding the participation of several groups, several communities, how did they participate in their own way, how did they contributed to support non-cooperation movement. So, you know, the notion of Swaraj, it was interrupted in its own way, still it was a pan-India movement. That means almost every section of the society, they participated in that movement and they wanted Swatantra Bharat. Swatantra means free Bharat, free India. So this was also a slogan, Swatantra Bharat. That means they wanted a free India. But let me tell you students that Gandhiji had to call off the non-cooperation movement, and this calling off was done in February 1922. Now you must be thinking that everything was going so well, people were participating, they were involved actively, then why there was a need to call off this movement, that means to stop the movement. So you know what students, this calling off of non-cooperation movement was again a very important act when it comes to history. Let me tell you that the Chauri Chaura Act in February 1922, because of this act, the non-cooperation movement was stopped. Now what is this Chauri Chaura? Chauri Chaura is a place. Chauri Chaura is in Gorakhpur and Gorakhpur is in Uttar Pradesh. So what happened? In Gorakhpur, at this place Chauri Chaura, a peaceful demonstration, it turned out to be very violent, and there were clashes with the police, and with this, during that time what happened? You know, a police station was burnt, and when Gandhiji heard this, that there were clashes with the police, the peaceful demonstration turned out to be very violent and stormy. So hearing all this, he immediately called off the non-cooperation movement, because he was very strong in his principle. He wanted everything to be done non-violently, that means no use of violence, and people were that time not so much trained. So Gandhiji thought that the proper training must be given to the people, then only they will understand the true meaning of non-violence, the essence of non-violence. Satyagrah, Satya ke liye Agra, this is the meaning of Satyagrah. Alright. So Gandhiji immediately called off the non-cooperation movement. So question may come in your examination regarding calling off of non-cooperation movement. That means why non-cooperation movement was called off. So you can very properly mention about the Chauri Chaura Act. Alright. So basically the movement, this non-cooperation movement started in January 1921 and it was called off in February 1922. That means 1 year. So for 1 year the So, for 1 year the movement was growing very properly, very successfully, but due to this non-violence, due to the clashes with the police, and as the police station was burnt, Gandhiji had to call off the movement. So, we have completed one section of this chapter, one important big section of this chapter, that is non-cooperation movement. Alright. So, after non-cooperation movement, another mass movement came to the country, and the name of that movement was civil disobedience movement. This is another very important mass movement. Civil means what? Civil means people. Disobedience means to disobey. So, in this movement we will see that how the people of our country and how the prominent leaders, how did they disobey, and was this movement a successful movement or not. So, students, before I start with the civil disobedience movement, let me tell you that the topic that we are going to study in this is towards civil disobedience. That means how from non-cooperation Gandhiji shifted to civil disobedience movement. There was a gap, there was a, I am saying again. So, there is a gap, and I will tell you about the year and everything regarding civil disobedience movement. So, dear students, let us come to the next topic, next very important topic, that is towards civil disobedience movement. Very important yet interesting, it is very interesting. Alright. So, if I talk about the year of civil disobedience movement, then the year is from 1930 to 31. Now, you must be thinking that non-cooperation movement ended in the year 1992, and the civil disobedience movement, it started in the year 1930. So, what was happening during this time? Cut this one second. Sorry, date was told wrong, so I am saying this again. I am starting this again topic. Okay, students. So, now let us come to the next important topic of this chapter, that is another part of this chapter, and the topic is towards civil disobedience movement. And if I talk about the year, then the year is 1930 to 1931, that is 1 year. Now, students, you must be thinking that non-cooperation movement ended in the year 1922, and this civil disobedience movement started in the year 1930. So, what was happening in this gap? Why such gap? As you see the topic is not civil disobedience movement, the topic is towards civil disobedience movement. So, you know, students, during this time, during this gap, actually training was given to people. Why training was given? Training was given for another mass struggle, big struggle, country level, pan India level struggle. Struggle for what? And training for what? Training for non-violence satyagraha. It was regarding satyagraha. As I told you about Chauri Chaura Act, because of Chauri Chaura Act only non-cooperation had to be called off. So, Gandhiji was very strict in his principle. He wanted complete violence everywhere. He did not want any kind of clash, any kind of riots or any other thing. So, that is why he thought that first training needs to be given to people. People need to understand the true essence of satyagraha, true essence of non-violence. So, during this time, during this gap, actually training was given to the people. Alright. And you know, students, by this time some leaders of Congress, they were tired by the mass struggle, and you know, they wanted to participate in election, or you can say provincial election. That means the election that was under the control of Britishers, because they wanted some power, because the time gap was increasing and nothing was changing. So, they were actually fed up. They thought that what is the use of all this, so let us continue whatever is going on, at least elections will be held, we will get some power. So, this is their thought. So, that is why they got tired. For if I talk about the leaders, for example, Motilal Nehru, C.R. Das, So these people, these important leaders, they thought that elections could be there, we could participate in elections, and you know, they formed Swaraj Party to participate in election. But if I talk about the young leaders, the radical leaders, for example, Jawaharlal Nehru, Subhash Chandra Bose, you know, these leaders pressed for mass agitation for full independence. They thought that no, now we have to fight, now we have to make our country free. Now we want full independence, we will not compromise with anything, we will not compromise with any conversation with the Britishers. We want full independence, we want complete Swaraj. This the young leaders, the radical leaders, the new leaders of Congress were thinking. Alright. So this is basically the background of civil disobedience movement, that how did it start. So before starting something big, preparation has to be there. So people were preparing, the training was given to people. Alright. Now students, before I talk further about civil disobedience movement, let me talk about two important factors that have helped to shape the Indian politics, that have helped to shape the Indian national movements during the late 1920s. And the two economic factors are, the first one is economic depression and the second one is Simon Commission. These are very important, and question may come in your exam regarding the factors that have helped to shape the Indian national movement during the late 1920s. Alright. So first let me talk about the first factor, that is economic depression. You know students, that time economic depression means, you know, that time there was worldwide economic depression, that is economic depression of the year 1929. That means the agricultural prices, they began to fall in the year 1926 and it completely collapsed after 1930. That means countryside was in great turmoil, there was a lot of distrust was built. And you know, because of this economic depression, the peasants found it really very difficult to sell their harvest. See, let's suppose a farmer had invested rupees 50 in producing 1 kg wheat and the price of that wheat fell to rupees 30. Will the farmer get any profit? There will not be any profit. The farmer will be in complete loss, right? And during that time they had to pay revenue, they had to pay rent. So the peasants, that time, they were very upset. Distrust was built between the peasants and the Britishers, because Britishers were not at all trying to compromise with the peasants. They were not lowering the prices. So peasant had to face a lot. So this was the first factor. So because of this, what happened? The peasants grew very furious and they wanted to revolt. They wanted that, okay, it's too much now, the Britishers had to go out from our country. So this is one important factor. Now the second factor is Simon Commission. Let me tell you students that Simon Commission was headed by Sir John Simon. Simon Commission is basically a statutory commission that was formed in Britain under, as I told you, Sir John Simon. And why this was formed? This was formed to look into the functioning of constitutional system and suggest some changes in India. So this system was formed in Britain, but the system was for India, for Indian constitutional, for the changes to be made in the Indian constitution. But there was one problem with this commission. Now we will see what was that problem. So students, one defect of the Simon Commission was that all the members of this commission were Britishers. There was no single Indian member in this commission. Just imagine that this commission was formed for Indian constitution and no Indian was a participant of this constitution. So when this commission came to India, it was greeted with the slogan, "Go back Simon." You must have heard this slogan, "Go back Simon, go back Simon." So with this slogan, it arrived in India, and you know, there were demonstrations against Simon Commission. That means it was not greeted well. People did not greet this well when it came to India. And you know, to counter this, the Viceroy, that is Lord Irwin. Now, what do you understand by Viceroy? Viceroy means an IS level officer, alright, if I talk about Britain. So, Lord Irwin, he announced an offer in October 1925. Now, what was that offer? The offer was dominion status for India. Now, what is the meaning of dominion status? Dominion status means that Indians will be given their several posts, there will be elections, everything will be there, but everything will be under Britishers. That means everything will be ultimately controlled by the Britishers. So, this was the offer, and there was one more offer. The offer was invitation for round table conference in order to discuss the future constitution. So, this offer was made, that is dominion status, and secondly, invitation was given to Gandhiji and the leaders to come to Britain to discuss about the future constitution in the round table conference. Alright, I hope till here the points are clear to everybody. Now, students, in the next video I shall be discussing about the response of this by the Indians, that how did the Indians responded to this. Till then, thank you so much, stay safe and please study thoroughly, stay connected.